reveal again, rising from the dead to introduce you to part 2 of Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. Our special Halloween episode. This week, we speak to the grandson of one of my former co-stars, RonChaney Jr. We speak to his grandson, RonChaney. Then I talk to a former child actress who shared the screen with yours truly in Ghost of Frankenstein, JanetAnnGallow. Don't miss it. Listen to them, children of the night. What music they make. Hi, I'm Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Frank Santopadre. Our guest this week is a personal thrill for me. He's an actor, author, makeup artist, public speaker, also happens to be the grandson of my favorite actor, the great RonChaney Jr., the only actor to play all 4 of Universal's classic monsters: Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, and, of course, the Wolfman. He's also the great-grandson of the legendary man of 1,000 faces, silent screen icon RonChaney. Please welcome to the show, RonChaney.
Well, happy Halloween, everybody. Great to be here.
And I should say to all the politically correct people on the internet that when I'm introducing RonChaney's grandson, I'm calling him RonChaney. That's his name, RonChaney. I'm not making fun of the Japanese. I'm not going, it's actor RonChaney. No, that's not what I'm doing.
Because
here.
You never do that kind of politically sensitive material.
No.
As anyone who's seen your act can attest.
It didn't have anything to do with the 2 Chinese characters he played now, did it?
No, that's right. That's right, he did.
Okay. Now,
welcome to the show, Ron. Thanks for doing it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So now I remember when I was a kid, they used to show that James Cagney movie that was a biography of RonChaney, that it was called Man of 1,000 Faces. Now, how much of that was actually true?
Well, there was quite a bit of it was true, but a lot of it was sensationalized. During that era of time, they changed the story somewhat. So, a lot of it was true, but a lot of it was certainly not sequential or chronologically in order. And I think probably one of the biggest flaws in it was, Dorothy Malone being a beautiful woman, you didn't see her as a 15-year-old. So, the mindset of a 15-year-old and somebody, beautiful in their 20s, late 20s, gives an altogether different take on
so
the
she
story
was
in itself.
15?
My great-grandmother, Cleva, was 15 years old when she first,
wow.
went on the road with Lon. 15, 16 years old, yes.
Yeah, because Dorothy Malone was definitely fully grown in that movie.
Yeah. And how does your granddad feel about being portrayed by Roger Smith?
Well,
who looked nothing like him.
Yeah. Well, I think the funny thing is, well, not necessarily funny, but my grandfather was very integral in the making of that film. In fact, I have the treatment that was written here with Ralph Wheelwright, and he was signed a deal with Universal to do that. And, they went through the whole process, and he was on. He was interviewed, obviously, as part of this development of the treatment. And he brought in his aunt and his uncles and the set musicians and friends of the family to make sure the story was pretty good. And then it went through afterwards, I think about 5 different rewrites till the final product, and that was what was released. And my great-grandmother was very disappointed because she also was interviewed with it. In fact, I think at one of the early screenings, she just pretty much got up and slammed out the door. So she didn't care much for the way that the story went. But, a lot of the points in it were true for sure, and a lot were not.
And with Lon Chaney, I realize both Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr., Lon Chaney, I saw Lon Chaney walking with the Queen doing the Werewolf of London, and I saw Lon Chaney Jr. walk, both Warren Zevon there.
My old neighbor, Mr. Zevon.
And now, I used to listen to a lot of Warren Zevon.
Oh, yeah. I was telling Gilbert we were neighbors in West Hollywood. He was an interesting man.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Now, Lon Chaney Sr., the great silent screen comic who dealt with the macabre, he didn't take acting lessons. How did he learn his craft? How did he learn how to act?
I think you have to go back to his childhood, with both of his parents being deaf mutes. So he really didn't even speak until he was 4 years old. Just learned to even start to talk because of that. But he was very close with his parents, and at a very young age he had to drop out of school because his mother was stricken with rheumatism, like inflammatory rheumatism. So her only method of being able to communicate via sign language was her hands. She was bedridden for about 3 years. So he had to drop out of school to take care of her. The older brother got a job. The father worked. The younger siblings were below, so he had to take care of his mother and them. And he basically became a little human newspaper when he would go to his father's barber shop and listen to all the town's news and go back and make up little costumes and little skits that he would act out for his mother. And they had this extreme bond just using their eyes that he learned to communicate and act out the little things that were going on around town. So probably that was his first bit of acting, and I think everything in his career had something to do with the sign language and that early foundation of expression and pantomime and all those things and gestures, things of that nature.
This is interesting because I can think of about 3 different actors and comedians, Gene Wilder, Jan Murray, and I think Jackie Gleason too. Their mothers died when they were young. And each one of them, the mother would be sick in bed. They'd go out to a movie or a vaudeville show and then come back and act it out for their mother.
Oh, wow. I never heard that.
I didn't know that.
Great story.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, he was doing that in, 1893, and about that time.
And I saw, both Frank and I watched it, Lon Chaney Jr. was showing some of the signs that deaf people use. And then they showed scenes from Chaney Sr.'s movies.
It's the clip from You Asked For It.
Oh, yes, yes.
That you must know, Ron. And in fact, it's available on YouTube. It's fascinating to watch your grandfather interpreting his father's style and his work.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's very affectionate about it, too.
First you see Lon Chaney Jr. showing, this is the way to say hate, that deaf people say hate. This is the way they say love. This is the way they say fear. Mm-hmm. And in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Lon Chaney is doing all of those deaf people moves as the character.
Absolutely. You could see abbreviated versions throughout his career. Even in The Phantom, you just see subtle gestures that kind of somebody that would be deaf that could read that type of thing, it would make sense to them. So there was always something that he would add, whether it was via that sign or expression or something. He was certainly a master of it and unique.
And he met his wife. She was a dancer. Right.
Wasn't
Actually,
she is a singer?
Well, I think
Yeah.
at first.
Oh, really?
She was a or I saw something that said she wanted to be a dancer, but she wasn't that good, and RonChaney taught her how to dance.
Well, he was a choreographer, and that was my great-grandmother Cleva, and she was the 15-year-old that got the audition, call, and she had been getting trained, for singing. She always, her mother had given her some schooling, and she had had some background going to different areas for singing. So when the troupe came along and played in Oklahoma, they would always do advances, so you get a bigger audience. If you could get some of the townspeople to, be in the play, then all their family comes. I think we still all do that today. We can't. But nonetheless, she got that audition, and then she came in. And, well, you're too young. You can't play. You're not even 16 years old yet. And she said, well, let me hear you sing. So my great-grandmother could really sing. She could hit the high note. She could break glass, let's put it that way. So she was just like this, diamond in the rough that they discovered. And then she wanted to go on the road, and her mother wouldn't let her. And she said, as soon as I'm of age, I'll run away. She was very headstrong, always was. And, they had met. Lon was working with the company at that time that was doing Delmar Gardens in Oklahoma. So there you go. That's how they met. And then when they went to go on the road, he was taking care of her, and they just kind of became sweethearts as they were traveling around in 1905, 1906, Oklahoma Territory, and throughout, different parts of the nation via train.
And he would travel, like these acting troupes would travel, and I heard, they would already be struggling for money, with what little the performers made, and sometimes the shows would run out of money, and they'd be stranded in the middle of nowhere.
That's absolutely true. And, they weren't vaudeville necessarily. They weren't vaudeville, but they were light operas, comedic operas. And in 1905, going in Oklahoma and Arkansas and all the way down to Florida, they went up into Canada and went both ways. And very often they would certainly go broke on the road, so they got stranded so often. Whenever they would make money, it would be great for a little while, and then they'd lose it, and they just did nothing but struggle. It wasn't going anywhere, and that's when they finally decided to move to California. He followed his brother out here, who had relocated in Los Angeles and was a stage carpenter, at one of the theaters there.
And Chaney and his wife, eventually their marriage started to face rough times.
Very true. A lot of jealousies, because actually Cleva became the bigger star. He was more of a second comedian. She was more of the star and a feature as she went along, so her popularity was, pretty big. And then when they got to California, they played with Fatty Arbuckle and that group there, I think.
Wow.
Ferris Hartman, yes. They all were on stage together back in those early days in L.A.
To tell our audience, this is Fatty Arbuckle, whose career was destroyed by a whole sex scandal. He was found innocent. But
after being tried, I think 3 times.
Yeah.
Well, so which leads to some of Lon's story, too, and what a scandal could do.
Oh,
and even way back in those days, because it ruined his career, for sure. He had to work under different names, Fat did. But
I heard he worked under the name Will Be Good.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Which scandal are you referring to, Ron? Was it his wife's attempted suicide?
Yeah, I mean, eventually that's what kind of nixed his stage career, because he never had had attention to going into film.
Yeah, sure.
He considered himself.
And the way she did it.
Yeah, well, a lot of the Man of 1,000 Faces, there was something to it, but not all of the story was there. I have my great-grandmother's journal that she wrote, and after he passed away, as a response to a magazine that was published by Liberty Magazine, and she was quite irate with the way that the story went, so she wrote her version of it. So I have that, and then I have a lot of the notes from his second wife. So I've been working on a book a number of years, kind of try to be the blueprint of a new film on Chaney.
Because they, according to story, at least, Chaney was on stage, and she appeared in the wings and drank, I think it's chloride of mercury, and as a suicide, like she was going to kill herself.
That's the Majestic Theater, right?
Yeah.
In Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it made the news, you know. She was rushed to the hospital, and she actually had just previously played her own gig down the street there. And previous to going there, and they'd had some fighting going on. There's a little more backstory than the way that it was presented.
Oh, yeah.
So it was pretty. There was a lot more drama going on than they depicted in film. And, so other things were going on, and which led to this event, and obviously was basically the ending. It took a couple of more years before they were finally divorced, but that was basically the end of the marriage.
And so it she lived, but it killed her singing voice, of course.
She explained it differently in her journal, but yeah, it definitely affected it. I knew my great grandmother, you know, and I remember her having a raspy voice. We had pictures of her when we were kids, you know. She actually survived quite long after Lon passed away.
I just remember in Man of a Thousand Faces, one of my favorite scenes is she shows up, probably never happened, but she shows up on the set of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And Cagney, in Hunchback makeup, goes over, and she gasps. And Cagney goes, "Still afraid of freaks, Cleaver?"
Yeah, well...
They took some liberties, huh, Ron?
Yeah, they took some liberties.
And
Cleaver wasn't like that. I don't think so at all. I think she had a lot of regrets for what she did. She laid a lot of the blame on herself, so, you know, it wasn't that it was, you know, jealousies and the business and those things were going on. And, you know, funny times during that period of time, still do, but I guess our family's always been trendsetters in that nature.
Also,
hopefully mostly good, but there's certainly some tragedies that exist, no doubt, in our family.
Also, in the movie, I mean, they're talking about, you know, Lon Chaney, who was a brilliant makeup artist, and because he did all his own makeups and Hunchback.
With that little kit that he traveled around with.
Yes, there'd always be those photos of that little beat-up metal kit.
Yep.
And he was brilliant at makeup. But in the movie, they used one of the Westmores to do Cagney's makeup, and it's so one of the biggest glaring problems there, and the Westmores are talented, but the makeup was terrible.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, that was another big discrepancy. You know, my search always to find the right person, you have to have similar bone structure, or, you know, and I think that was the difference. If you look at Cagney, he had a little bigger head. Lon was much thinner, so no matter what appliance you would put on, it didn't look, you know, and it's kind of hard. I think that's always the tough part, to compare yourself to Lon, you know, and there was only one of them, so, you know, you're comparing yourself to the masterpiece, you know, of what he created. So, plus they had some issues, I do believe, with Universal, MGM. If you remember at the end, they show the different pictures, you know, kind of in drawings. Was that because MGM still held rights to those films? So that's how they had to depict it to get around that.
And the funny thing is, I've seen photos of you and films of you. You actually have a resemblance to your great-grandfather.
Yeah, I do, you know, and so I do go into the makeup. I enjoy it. I do it more for fun, for tribute. But usually I've written something, and I usually have there's something behind why I do it, whether it's just a test or for fun or for the fans to enjoy, then I'll do it for those reasons. But with most of the makeups I've done, there was a reason behind each and every one of them, so with different projects I'm working on.
You know, I saw an interview with Forrest Ackerman, Ron. He said, and I don't know if you agree with this, I'd be curious. He said if your great-grandfather had lived, that he would have played Dracula. I mean, he was being courted to play Dracula at the time of his death, but Forrest Ackerman was saying he would have played Frankenstein, he would have played Jekyll and Hyde. He believed that he would have gone on to play all the classic characters, or at least been offered the roles.
You would have thought so. I would agree with that, too, because think of it, MGM loaned him out before for the Phantom. He was under contract, but they knew that his star would get bigger with the Phantom, so they loaned him out for that. And why would they not loan him out again for another big role like that?
Right.
Would make sense that he would have been in line, or probably, and his contract would have been ending, too, so he would have been, free again. He would have been independent, although I think he enjoyed working with Irving Thalberg at MGM. He's one of the few executives he trusted.
And his death, of course, in 1930, we've talked about this with Bela Jr., opens the door for Lugosi to be cast as the Count.
Yeah, it's funny how that all came kind of full cycle there, because, with Chaney not doing it, it went to Lugosi, and then, of course, he turned down the Frankenstein, so Karloff got it.
Right.
10 years later, they were looking for someone else and got handed back to Chaney again to finish up. So that was kind of cool. It's a cycle.
Gilbert, I thought you thought this was you think this was interesting, and you probably know this already. Yeah. But Forrest Ackerman was saying that he believed that Groucho. Do you know this? Have you heard this before?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Patterned his crouch and his part of his character, his movements in Lon Chaney in London After Midnight.
Yeah, I had heard that. Someone who had seen London After Midnight, which is a totally lost film. All you see is a scary vampire makeup he has. But they say that the walk, I mean, people who saw it now, who remember it, laugh because he's walking around like Groucho Marx.
Have you heard that, Ron?
I did more recently. I never knew that, but yeah, and I tried looking it up to see what he walked like, and it kind of was he would bend his legs inward and kind of into this stooped grouch. So, yeah, they look similar.
and the funny thing is, Chaney, who did this scary makeup, Phantom of the Opera and all these others, never actually was a monster in any of his films.
You're right, and if you look at very much the theme of his films, it was the unrequited love, and he sacrificed himself most often for somebody else's happiness at the end, and then he played all these deformed characters or misread characters, which leads you straight back to the deafness in the family. And, I'm sure there was a lot of ridicule. His father's name was Dummy in town. He was Dummy Chaney. He was the barber, called Dummy Chaney. So he had to listen to that stuff all his life. So,
yeah, that's what they call deaf people, dummies.
Well, that was really what they call it, even when they do interviews. Dummy Chaney, he worked back over there. He was the barber in that head barber shop, in Colorado Springs for 35 straight years, the head barber, So you can imagine somebody with sign language and using their hands, how adept they would be to doing shaves. Of course, there's razors and everything else. I mean, and he sat at the head chair the entire time and was like in a suit every day on time, and that's where a lot of Lon's fortitude came from, was just definitely the character, just like his father.
Well, and the work ethic, and the sacrifices, the physical toll that some of those costumes and makeup. Forgive me, Ron, and I did some research on this, and I can't remember the film where he's playing a legless, where he's got his knees.
Oh, is that The Penalty?
I think is it The Penalty?
Yes.
And he's got his legs strapped up behind the top coat. The pain that he must have endured.
And I heard he would jump and land on his knees.
I would recommend, if the audience has never seen a Chaney film, that would be one I'd recommend seeing, because you truly think he had no legs, the way he devised this thing. And he did definitely torture himself in probably most of his roles.
And
in
the
some way or another,
Hunchback,
because it was always left up to him to create it, so he had to figure that himself.
And I heard with the Hunchback, the hump on his back was like 60 pounds, and he wore these straps to keep himself bent over the whole time.
Yes. you can see the harness, and it has this, kind of center chest piece of ring where they would latch the the strap onto it to pull him down, so he physically couldn't stand up straight. He stayed hunched. So he suffered for that one too, and also after that he had to wear glasses because he did damage to his eye.
Oh, geez, this I hadn't heard.
Ever after the Hunchback, he had to wear. You'll see him wearing glasses after that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, the personal sacrifice that he went through for his art.
Well, the funny, how do you know until you do it? And by the time you do it, then the damage is done. I mean, I've kind of experimented with some of the makeups, and I did a little test on London, and kind of think I figured out how he did one of his things, and it definitely was painful, and my eyes weren't quite the same afterwards, but it was trying to find that secret,
And is it true? See, because this, you never know when it gets to be a story, that he used a fish hook to turn his nose up as the Phantom of the Opera?
Well, I'll share this since I shared it at the event I did last week. My grandfather kind of threw him an idea when he was watching him, trying to figure out how to flare his nose up, and he was trying different things, and he said, why don't you, hey, how about a lady's hairpin? You kind of pull it up on there, and he thought it was a pretty good idea. And so he tried it. That's pretty good, but after about 2 days, it ate right through his nose, and Graham said he bled like a stuck pig, and he cussed him out for that. And then he went back, and then he said, well, but they gave him, he needed time for his nose to heal, so he started working on the mouthpiece, So, yeah, he did some extreme thing. He figured out something else to work, but you can see what he went through, and again, how would you know till you've already done the damage,
And Chaney, when he was struggling, anything, he just wanted to have a career in showbiz. He did like every single job you could on those.
It was his work ethic. He was constantly on the move. If he was standing around, he'd go help move lights, if he was doing, because when he was, and it really goes back to his stage days and even back to his childhood when not only did he have to take care of his mother, he had to take care of his younger siblings, so he was cooking and he was washing dishes and he was doing laundry back in those days, that's all by hand, everything. So, this is where he learned a lot of the early skills for sure that carried with him throughout his life, and that work ethic too.
And one time he picked up a hitchhiker by the name of Boris Karloff.
I thought you were going to find that story.
I'm going to let you tell that one because it's a good one.
I heard Boris Karloff told a story. He was hitchhiking. He was a struggling actor, and he gets picked up by RonChaney Sr. And RonChaney basically was giving him advice, and he says, find something that you can do that other people can't do.
Pretty good advice, huh?
Yes.
Well, he was generous that way, wasn't he, Ron? I mean, I was kind of moved by these stories of him standing up for struggling actors, for crew members, righting wrongs. There's a great quote by Wallace Beery that I know you know, where he says he was someone who walked with kings and never lost his common touch.
Absolutely. He had too much struggle in his life. The effort was mostly a struggle. I would have to say most of his life was a struggle till he finally attained, some level of fame, but he was a true artist. It was everything to him. Once he discovered he wasn't going to be on stage anymore, and by the time he hit the silent films, he could go make money, and the more things he could do, the more money he could make, because he needed to get a home for his son. Because once they separated, my grandfather was put in a home for, divorce and disaster.
That was RonChaney Jr. He was put away in a home.
He remarried a gal that was actually a chorus girl that they worked with Colvin Dill, and they got married around 19, right after their divorce was final. They got married, and then Gramps, lived with them, and of Cleva was pretty much out of the picture till later. It wasn't like what they depicted in the story that she had no contact with him or he didn't know that she was alive. It was just the fact she was no longer around. And I think once that bridge was burned, Lon didn't really forget stuff like that. So,
Yeah, it's admirable. So let's talk a little bit about your grandpa, who was born in the trunk.
Oh, wait. We should talk about how, according to Chaney Jr.,
oh, yeah,
how he was born.
Mm-hmm.
In Oklahoma, right?
Oklahoma. They were at Del Mar Gardens. I went there to try to verify it. I just could not for the life of verify where this old place was, Belle Isle, because there was no lake there. And then I went to the Oklahoma Historical Society after researching, and finally I found it. It used to be this wonderful place, but then it was overrun with mosquitoes, so it didn't exist, and there was pictures of this lake there. And during February, of course, it's cold in February, and, Cleva went into an early labor.
According to RonChaney Jr., he described it as he was black and dead when he was born. And the doctor was about ready to give up and just bury him. And RonChaney Sr. grabbed him, ran outside in freezing winter, crashed a hole through the ice in the lake, and dunked him to shock him into being alive.
That's how the story goes.
Great story. I hope it's true.
You like that, huh?
Yeah, because
he was born like 2 months premature. My great-grandmother, they refer to it, looked like what a cube of butter looked like, and he was revived, and then Lon made back in those days, they had shoe boxes, so he cut holes in it all over, and then he lined the whole thing with cotton, and then they put my grandfather in this, box line thing and put him in one of the old stoves back then, like an early incubator, and that's how they kind of started nursing him along. And
so they had RonChaney Jr., the Wolfman, was put in a shoebox, and the shoebox was put in the oven.
Well, that's it. He was big.
Unbelievable.
He was probably made one of the first incubators, to kind of keep him alive. And he said 6 months later, Dad was using me as a prop in a stage act, like juggling him in a stage act, the little infant.
Now that's...
He made his first appearance at 6 months old.
Kind of like Buster Keaton?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He got Buster Keaton, they practically killed him on stage.
They used to toss him into the audience, according to Jimmy Caron.
Well, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, those guys were just amazing, just phenomenal artists. Charlie Chaplin, Chaney. What a magical time, those silent films, because it truly was a different time, and there's so much more pantomime was involved in silent films of that day, and music contributed so much to them that we've kind of lost, but now there's new shows, with scores, which you see them in a whole nother light that way.
So Chaney Jr. was basically tossed around like a prop?
Indeed. He became a part of the show.
Well, he did. I mean, he grew up on the road. He was very much a child of show business.
Oh, absolutely. He definitely was the proverbial baby born in a trunk, no doubt about it. And even Lon made a hammock, in the caboose that they used to travel on, and so that they would put him in there while they were traveling. Because remember, we're talking 1905, 1906, going down the road, a train track. They were building the track as they were going along. So they would play in barns. They would play in, storefronts. Very seldom did they actually get a legitimate theater unless they reached Chicago or one of the bigger cities. So, you can imagine the struggle was.
And when Chaney and his wife were performing, they would hand Chaney Jr. over to the chorus girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Cleva started doing her own thing, so she was becoming a big star. She was a big cabaret star. She was a hit up in San Francisco, and then she was a hit in L.A., and, Lon, he was the stage manager. That's what he did. He stage managed. He played roles in those early stage days. So he was the choreographer. He was doing about 5 people's jobs. I mean, he was that, just high-strung that way, and he would do that for probably 10, 12 hours a day. They put on like 5 and 6 shows, matinee shows all day long into the night. And so the chorus girls, Cleva was out, and they were kind of separated, and she was doing her own thing. So Creighton, my grandfather, would go with his dad to the shows, and the girls would watch him. The chorus girls would watch him while Lon was working. So
yeah, he was still Creighton then. RonChaney Jr. wouldn't happen for years.
Yeah, I mean, even as a kid, watching the ending of Man of a Thousand Faces, where Cagney is dying, and he hands his makeup kit that says Lon Chaney on it, and he takes a crayon and draws Junior, is total bullshit, of course.
Well, especially because he didn't want his son to go into the business.
The story varied a little bit there. I think that was something that they made up, certainly.
Well, didn't he run... I'm sorry to cut you off. Didn't he discourage young Creighton, from going into show business? I mean,
yeah. He knew the struggles. He saw it. He lived it. He knew everything about the business. He knew how the executives work. By that time, he was big enough to start calling some of his own shots now, but he never forgot the hardships of it and the breakup of the marriage. So it was really hard on him. I don't think he wanted to see his own son. He would have rather seen him in a more stable occupation. So
he wanted him, and I think he did for a while, Chaney Jr., work as a plumber.
Yeah, he married, my grandma, of course. He married Grandma, and her father owned General Water Heating Company in Los Angeles. They made all the water heaters, so the company did very well. He became the secretary of the company, and then when he had his opportunity after his dad died that someone, was going to get him an audition, he resigned because it was in his heart. He grew up with it. I don't think he could have helped it, even with the one. It was in him, to go pursue it. So when his opportunity came, he did.
And his childhood was, a lot of it, years in basically like an orphanage.
No. Between the years, for a time, he was basically put into a home. Because Lon was working and Cleva was a mess. She was a mess. She didn't show up at the divorce hearing. She just knew that she couldn't take care of him. Let's put it that way. She regretted it all her life, but that's the way it was.
and he was struggling. He started to get bit parts in movies, like in real low-budget movies, as Creighton Chaney. And then they started pushing him to, they said, we can only sell you as Lon Chaney Jr.
Well, that's, Lon was pretty, he became the #1 box office star. His movies were still big, but sound was coming into play. Now he did one talking film, but, he was
Unholy 3.
Right.
Yeah, remake there.
Remake.
So... he kind of followed in he knew of anybody. There was one person of anybody knew that his father could never, that he was so unique. It was him. So he didn't really want to follow with the same name, even though I don't think he was opposed to it. I think the second wife was more opposed to it than he was, and he was cool with it. But he didn't. So he had several offers, but he signed with David Selznick at RKO because he was allowed to keep his name, and he started his career as Creighton Chaney.
Yeah, because I had always heard he was kind of, for the rest of his life, embarrassed to be Lon Chaney Jr. It made him uncomfortable.
No, I don't think so. Once he took the name, he didn't like the junior on it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he minded the Lon Chaney. He didn't particularly care for the junior on the end.
I read an autobiography from Keenan Wynn.
Oh.
And he said he was working with Chaney.
Mm-hmm.
And Chaney Jr. said, "Look at me. I got grandkids. Do I look like a junior to you?"
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool. I never heard that before, but I had some pictures with them together, so, well, that's cool.
No, I was just going to say, is it safe to say, Ron, that the name changed actually gave him a career boost when he went from Creighton Chaney to Lon Chaney Jr.? Did the roles improve? Was there a direct connection, or was it just that he was starting to break through on his own?
No, he did get more money. He signed with Fox, so he got a contract with Fox, so he was paid better, but he didn't get any particular great roles. And then when he left Fox, or when the contract ended, he struggled. I mean, he was struggling to the very end. He'd been divorced and remarried, and kind of lost his family through all of this, going into the picture business, and then he did Of Mice and Men.
Yeah, now, originally Broderick Crawford was cast as Lenny, but Chaney really campaigned for it.
Well, he'd done it on the stage, right?
Yeah, in California.
And once he did it in the West Coast, they opened, and then they went to San Francisco. It was a huge hit up there. They came back, did a L.A. show, and from then on, that gave him his opportunity to obviously play it in the film. That's why Broderick didn't end up getting that role. And then it's kind of funny, later in their careers, Gramps played Harry Brock in Born Yesterday.
Yes.
In a subway circuit back east, and he was hoping to get that film role, and then Broderick took that one, so they kind of got back at each other. And they were good friends, too, and used to brawl and drink and have a good time together.
And I heard Chaney Jr. was like, they were using him, before he even had the part, to test the other actors who they were auditioning for Of Mice and Men.
Isn't that how Louis Milestone got convinced?
Yes,
Ron?
Absolutely. That's how he got the role. He didn't want to have him, but he did test. And what was it that he said? He said something along the lines that after he tested all these different ones just to read the parts for the other actors I was auditioning, I couldn't see anyone else playing that role after all of that.
It's funny. I like Broderick Crawford, but I don't see him.
Yeah,
I don't see him as Lenny. I guess he was good in it, and he did it on Broadway. But now, I can only throughout all the versions of that I've seen. There's one with John Malkovich.
Oh yeah,
I can only see your grandpa.
I can't. In the same way, I can't. I mean, when after Phantom of the Opera, any version of Phantom of the Opera was terrible. After the Chaney version. There was the Herbert Lum,
Didn't Claude Rains did it?
Yeah, and all terrible. And now, supposedly the other versions of Mice and Men that they've done over the years have been good, but I can't watch it without Chaney and Burgess Meredith together.
The other guys were wonderful. I think they all did a marvelous job, but Gramps was the best Lenny ever.
Yeah, and whenever Chaney Jr. gets maligned, which you'll see people write, and they'll talk about him being some terrible actor or something, I always think then they obviously haven't seen Of Mice and Men, because his performance was amazing in there.
Oh, absolutely. Honestly, I've seen Gramps in a lot of films. We used to watch him on TV here and there, Oh, there's Gramps. Oh, that's cool. He's in another movie. And he did a lot of Indians and mostly Westerns and things like that, of course, horror films. But it was when I saw Of Mice and Men that I didn't see him as my grandfather anymore. I saw him as his character. He was so good at it. I mean, even to me, I believe that was his best role ever.
Was it a setback for him, Ron, not getting the part in the Hunchback movie in 1939? I know he was up for the part.
He was up for the part. Would he have done it? Yeah, I think he would have. He knew sign language. He grew up with it. He lived with his grandparents. Communicated via sign. It would have been interesting to see what he could do. And I actually have a photograph. I think he did a test makeup on it. And I've got a photo in our archives that he's actually the Hunchback, but he's about that age. Of course, he did it later on Route 66.
Yes,
he's much older.
Sure.
But this one is from a much younger, so I'm imagining without actually seeing it, it's got to be the test for it.
I kind of wonder, though, if it was good that he didn't get it, because then it could have been like, Frank Sinatra Jr. singing a Frank Sinatra song.
Interesting.
And everybody would immediately go, oh, he's not his father.
Well, that always concerned him. I mean, when you have a shadow like that over you, it's, no matter what, people didn't mean it intentionally, but, no matter at one point or another, even when they were talking about his own long career, it inevitably would always they'd lead to his father and want to know about him, and it's, sometimes you probably after so many times you get a little frustrated with that, but, he was very proud of his father, loved him, and, there was some tough times in there, so,
and
they all bore scars.
Then that led him on to Man-Made Monster with Lionel Atwill.
Well, that's an interesting... I wanted to ask Ron if that's a turning point, you think, Ron, in his career, because he's coming off of Mice and Men, which is a prestige film.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess then 1 Million BC, where he makes the makeup and then he doesn't get a chance to use his own makeup because of union rules. But it looks like there's a certain career trajectory or a career direction there when he's coming off of great notices for the stage, a part of Mice and Men, and then also the film. And within a year and a half, he's in horror films.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, the corner was turned and he had trouble turning back.
And horror films are kind of looked on as people as like, it gets looked down on.
Well, they were B movies. I mean, even back in those days, they were considered B movies. Nobody's going to like these, but then everybody loved them. And we're hitting a jackpot here. You well know there's always money involved, and then people reacted in such a way. I mean, you can go back to, they did Frankenstein way, way back when, that isn't the thing. But this really the Hunchback kind of, it wasn't really a horror film. But the Phantom really kind of set it. Nosferatu, of course, before that, but it was more on the Europe side. But once it got here, with Dracula, then Frankenstein, and then The Bride, and all those cool films, there was a mystique that people like being scared, I don't know what it is about us, but until this day, being on the edge is kind of fun, too.
and he got his second great part, his most famous role, as Lawrence Talbot, who would turn into the Wolfman
in 41.
Indeed, that was his baby, as he referred to it. Nobody else could play it like he did, and he did it in all 5 of the Universal films. And it was something that with Lenny, he removed himself from his father's shadow. Now he was looked at as his own actor in himself, like you said, Frank, which led to the Universal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Wolfman, he was able to create that character, through his acting. And I think you see a lot of the sign and the like you were saying, Gilbert, Lon he was showing these signs for fear and for love and you see those things in the Wolfman. If you really look for them, the facial features and the pantomime where the anguish was just so evident. I think that's what endeared him to the fans that loved that film.
And it was, the Wolfman, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, and Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
And he was always trying to not hurt anybody. Just, it's kind of that dual nature in people, and I think maybe that's a lot of people identify with that.
Well, also, he brings such sadness to the part,
Yeah.
There's you could look at it on the surface as a B movie, but there's he's tragic.
It's like
he brings so much to it.
It's kind of like a horror film noir.
It is.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah. You know what? Never thought of it that way. I think you're right. And there was such pathos in that role. But look at Bela Lugosi was in Maria Usked's Spy. I mean, there was some fine at Claude Rains.
Ralph Bellamy.
The cast was A+. The movie maybe budget was down, but with the talent they had in there, I think that's where those films, rose above and became classics.
Don't forget Maria Uspanskaya.
Oh yes,
absolutely.
The way you walk is thorny through no fault of your own.
Now, that was pretty good.
Now, Chaney Jr., though, they always talk about this, that he was a bad drinker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny that. Yeah, he liked to drink. There's no doubt about that. It was during those days, he grew up in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, and, I mean, by the time he was doing that, he liked to drink. The guys all drank. He hung out with Broderick, and a lot of the stars at Universal were big boys back in those days, and he liked, he wasn't just an actor. He liked to hunt. He liked to fish. He liked to ride horses, I mean, he really had a lot of different hobbies he did. I think the actors more so in those days did as opposed to today.
I heard Chaney and Broderick Crawford, since they would be booked together a lot, would get bombed out of their skulls and get into fist fights.
I heard Robert Stack said that. I read in an interview.
Oh, yeah?
That they were kind of the terrors of the Universal lot.
Yeah, they would beat each other up, and then they go action, and they do the scene, and then they go back to, like, punching each other, and not even out of hatred.
Well, they were acting. I mean, I remember Gramps talking about that stuff, so, okay, we're going to act this out, and both on set and off, let's put it that way. But on set, okay, I think in North of Klondike, they had my grandfather did a lot of great fight scenes. He looked over his overall career, man, he did some great fight scenes. But in that one, he said, well, we were there, we were throwing, pulling our punches and turning like you do as actors. They'd both done stunts in their day, and of course, all of a sudden, they nailed each other. I said, okay, and then so they really went at it in that, and they got bloodied up, and then afterwards they would they would have a good time too. They did tend to like to drink together, and they could probably match. They could match each other pretty good in that regard. But one of the funniest ones was when they were the terror of Universal for sure. But I don't know if you guys ever saw that photograph of them. My grandfather, he was in one of the sound stages or one of the sets, and he's looking at the ceiling. All the furniture is like upside down and stuck to the ceiling, and he's got this puzzled look on. I said, how did this stuff get up? Apparently the night before him and Bride had tied one on, they went in there and they turned everything upside down. They glued it and hammered it. Also, when they came in the next day, everything was upside down in the set. So they knew who did it, so they got a little bit of trouble on that one.
Now there was also, and this was a bad thing that happened with Chaney through his drinking and the way they would do live TV. He was in a live production of Frankenstein. Do you know this story?
Yeah. Well, it's possible. Not being there, I don't know, but that is as the story that they were live, and he thought they were doing a take, so he wasn't breaking stuff like he was. And
it's very strange to watch the footage of him picking up the furniture and then putting it down safely.
Yes. You go, why is he? Because he's supposed to smash the house to bits.
Right. Well, it probably could make sense that, I don't know, maybe he misread it or he didn't know. Obviously he thought it was a rehearsal, or he would have broken it. He was a pretty physical guy. He knew how to play that role. It's kind of where he had his bread. He called his bread and butter really as Lenny. You were asked about being typed as a horror actor, but he was equally as typed as Lenny.
And even up to when the Monkees was the biggest show on the air, he reprised his Lenny role.
Oh, yeah, that. Lenny and George with Uncle Leo, Len Lesser. Len Lesser.
Well, he did that throughout his career. You can see Lenny in a lot of it. When he went back on stage a couple of times, I interviewed his stage manager at one time, and he said he was pretty frustrated. They'd play cards after, during the long stretches between, the performances. And he said, he would create a character, he'd get the role, and he'd create the character how he wanted to play it, and when they get there, they'd be directed in the direction, oh, man, that is really good, but can you put a little more of the Lenny in it? And they did it to him a lot, so, he just called it his bread and butter so he could pull it out of the hat at any time, go into that character, so he was a little frustrated with it, but, it also gave him a good living, too.
Gilbert and I were talking, Ron, about there's a clip of him online toward the end of his life, and he's talking with some small degree, I think, of resentment for the way the comedies, I guess particularly Abbott and Costello and Frankenstein, which he uses the word ruins, ruined the Universal horror stories and the horror films? I mean, did he feel that way? Did he?
Well, I think he knew once it went comedy, that cycle was over. And maybe it was the language they used at that time. Even when I read what he wrote now, was different than it is now. So different words could be interpreted differently. You know what I mean? I think he enjoyed it, but he knew that part of his career was done. They would never take them serious again after a comedy.
Because, he had a little bit of a flair for comedy. I mean, he was in a couple of Bob Hope pictures. He was in Here Come the Coeds. You talked about Born Yesterday.
He had a wonderful sense of humor. He really had a wonderful sense of humor. People don't know that. And he was very creative, too. But he really had no formal education. He grew up, in a train for the most part, really never went to school till he was older. And, so...
And it's so funny. In Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, both Chaney and Bela Lugosi are very funny. And, people don't realize it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, they're playing it straight, but they're kind of adding that element. Oh, wait a second, this is a comedy. And, I mean, playing it like that made it more funny. So, they definitely were both. That's a classic. I must admit, I love that film.
Do you have any sense, or did he ever talk about that film, or if he had any fun making it?
He did have fun making it, and I think sometimes, he'd been an actor a long time, and maybe sometimes, if they're not, doing it, I know that Abbott and Costello liked to have a lot of fun on set, and maybe he was a little more serious. Let's get this work done first, and then we can have some fun or something like that, But, that's... He had a great sense of humor, and I know that he loved the movie. I mean, so I don't know why there would be any controversy over it. It was obviously a huge hit for him. But he had been going through some personal things prior to that film, so that might have something to do with it.
When I was, I was of that generation of kids who horror movies and old movies started showing on TV. And I wonder if Chaney realized that to my generation, Lon Chaney Jr. was the big star. It wasn't Lon Chaney Sr. to us. We knew he was related, but it was Lon Chaney Jr. that we all looked at as a star.
Well, that's interesting. You say, now, so where did you grow up? Back east?
Yeah, in New York.
So, and I was from, I grew up in Palm Springs area in California. It was a small town then, but as I learn now that I do more of the family thing, of all those shows were people on the East Coast, and you had your horror hosts back there. They had them in Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York and down east. And, I never realized that, out here we didn't have that market. So he gained a whole nother generation of fans with those television shows. And then, of course, Forey Ackerman, Famous Monsters magazine just, kind of cemented them in that horror genre.
And I have to tell you something. Right now, I'm interviewing you from my apartment. On the wall, when you come in,
we should take a picture and send it to you, Ron.
Yes, there's a fiberglass life mask of Lon Chaney Jr. on the wall
cool.
in a glass case.
Oh, cool.
And
I didn't know you were such a big Chaney Jr.
Oh,
fan.
he's been obsessed with
God.
your grandfather ever since, since I knew him. Yeah, forever.
And I also, because you mentioned Forey Ackerman and Famous Monsters, and Famous Monsters, they said that Lon Chaney Jr. was not feeling well, and they gave an address where you could write him a get well card. So I was a little kid. I wrote him a get well card, and I got back in a little envelope a postcard-sized photo of the Wolfman, and it was signed Lon Chaney on the bottom. And I have that in a frame hanging on my wall.
Oh, you have to send a picture of the life mask and a picture of that to Ron.
Yes. Yeah, so
I know which one. I know which one you're talking about. Did it say Dallas, Texas, or something on the back?
I don't know. I'd have to look. You
Yeah, he did.
see,
That's my grandfather. He loved kids. I think that's why I was so close to him. When I grew up with him, I was a child. He passed away when I was 17 years old. So my life with my grandfather was growing up with this man that, I knew he was an actor, but he was Gramps to me. We didn't really, he would talk about the movies, but it was just kind of, oh, that's what he did, To me, he was more home, and then I'd see him on TV, go, oh, wow, I thought he was home,
And it seems like one of the reasons he was so great as Lenny is that in a lot of ways he was a big kid.
He was.
And I remember seeing a quote where he said if he could, he'd adopt every single orphan because there's nothing lousier than growing up unloved.
Well, he had a tough childhood. There's no doubt about it,
Did he try to adopt Janet-Anngallow?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matter of
Yeah,
fact,
sure. Goes on Ghost of Frankenstein.
Twice.
And her brother.
And her brother.
Yeah. Because her mother died when she was 8.
Yeah.
And Chaney was in love with her. And we're going to be calling Janet Ann shortly. So
We're talking to her for the same Halloween episode, Ron.
Oh, that's great. And I know Janet. I love her. She's such a doll.
We'll say hi for you.
Oh, we'll give her your love.
Yeah, so yes, he did, and he liked kids. I think he felt that probably had to do with his own upbringing, for sure, no doubt about it.
And you got to understand too. RonChaney Jr. to me is like to a teenage girl what Justin Bieber is.
Ron, he's not kidding.
That's hysterical. Well, I'll have to get you something there from our collection somehow,
Oh, thank you.
Ron, is there something there's so many other questions we could ask you. We'll do it another time, or when you're in New York, you look us up. We would talk about Stanley Kramer and High Noon and the Defiant Ones and all the other cool stuff he did in his career. But do you have something you want to plug or something you want to talk about? I know you've been working on a
Century of Chaney.
Yeah, Century of Chaney's book. You want to say anything about it?
That is a book. I found that book when we moved my grandmother years and years ago, and I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. But I know when I found it, it was something that had to do with following my own path and making a new film of it this day, and I've kind of been researching ever since. I'm back working on it, but he announced it on Johnny Carson in 1969.
Wow.
And I remember him working on it, so I kind of jump off because I do some producing and other things, so I kind of get sidetracked, but it's never far from my mind. Everything I do relates to the Chaney, so I just get more knowledgeable as I try different things myself. So hopefully in this next year I'll get that first one out, and that's the early part of our family, and I really cover the early years of the family and the deafness, I call it. Chapter 1 is called The Foundation.
And don't you have a desire to make a film, did I get this right, about your great-grandpa?
Absolutely. That has been my goal all along, and I've been writing a few scripts myself, and maybe we can go into that next time around.
Next time.
Okay, so...
Well, we hope we see that book.
Well,
one
I
of
hope
these
so
days.
Too. It's been a goal I owe it to the fans, and so I've kind of done my thing right now. I kind of tried different projects, and I think I've got to get back to that, and that's my next goal.
Good. And Gilbert will want a signed one.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you got it. I look forward to meeting you in person someday.
And if you happen to have the silver handle from the Wolfman.
Actually, I have a identical replica. Bob Burns, who owned that piece, years ago, we had a new cast done by this a great friend of ours, Henry Alvarez, who was a brilliant artist, and we recast the original props, so I do have a couple reproductions of that, and it's very cool. And I have a set of his Wolfman teeth, too.
Wow.
And, God, the Wolfman teeth.
I do.
Oh, my God.
No Wolfbane?
The Wolfman's teeth.
Also, we're
absolutely.
supposed to ask you,
Hey, I have my own, too. You know, it runs in the blood.
did Chaney and Burgess Meredith ever speak years?
Did they stay in
past that?
touch?
Not really that I'm aware of. I tried to interview Burgess once years ago, and he was just coming out with his book, and I wanted to kind of get a comment from him. You know, that's what I've tried to do over the years, get comments from various people, you know, about their thoughts on Shane, kind of put it into the area of the story that it would belong. But he was working on his book, so I really didn't get any real clear-cut comment from him, unfortunately.
They were such a great team.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm angry at Burgess Meredith.
Yeah, you know, he wanted to release his book, but, you know, I
No,
got it.
I'm saying right now on my podcast, fuck you, Penguin.
Don't take it to heart, Gil. Ron,
Hey, you know, their work speaks for itself. It was an amazing movie, and if it
I don't
wasn't
care.
for all of them...
Fuck
yeah.
you, Penguin, and fuck you, Mickey from the Rocky movies.
You know that 39 was a tough year, Ron. That film could have won Best Picture. But
I think he could have.
stiff
It
competition.
just came in the wrong year, and I think he could have won an Academy Award for it, but again, best year in film ever.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to wrap up because JanetAnnGallow is waiting for
She's
me.
waiting for our call, Ron.
Dude.
I'm Gilbert Gottfried. This has been Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host Frank Santopadre, and we have been talking to RonChaney. That's right, RonChaney, who is the grandson of the Wolfman himself, Lon Chaney Jr., and the great-grandson of the Phantom of the Opera and the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And you'll have to come back on my podcast.
Well, I'd love to. You let me know when you're ready.
And look us up when you're in New York, Ron.
I shall.
Happy Halloween. This was a lot of fun.
Same to you guys. Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to everybody. Thanks.
Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Frank Santopadre, and our guest is a former child actress who appeared in such films as Canyon Passage, Till We Meet Again, It Ain't Hay, and she shared the screen with performers such as Ray Milland, Dana Andrews, Susan Hayworth, and Abbott and Costello. But she'll always be near and dear to our hearts, co-starring at the tender age of 5 with Bela Lugosi and my man Lon Chaney Jr. in 1942's Universal horror classic Ghost of Frankenstein. Please welcome to the show JanetAnnGallow.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, Janet. Thanks for doing this.
And I want to tell our audience just how much we appreciate this. Because we had you booked for another day. And then we got a call that you weren't feeling well. And
I had a sore throat and my voice was cracking a lot.
Oh, yeah. And I thought that's going to be it. She'll use this as an excuse. She'll say, I don't feel good. And you called back and said, okay, I'll do it the next day.
Right.
And that's
no,
a pro.
it's my pleasure, really.
Now, I got to ask you first, do you remember doing a short film called On a Prayer with Larry?
Yes.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Now, could you name the other two stars in that?
Let me see. It was, hold on just a second. I'm trying to think. Chuck, was it Chuck?
Chuck
Chuck
McCann.
Oh, Chuck McCann.
Chuck McCain, that's right. Chuck McCain.
Chuck McCann.
And
Larry Storch. Both
Larry
of them.
Storch, and also the gal there, that she and I had a great time. I'm trying to think of her name. Oh, it's terrible.
That's okay. Let us
Yeah.
know when you think of it. But
Because what's so funny about this, and now interviewing you, we already interviewed Larry Storch and Chuck McCann.
yeah, they've both been guests on this show.
Really?
On this show, Janet.
So we've got the
great.
entire cast of that film.
What's it called? On a Prayer?
It was a fun little movie to be in. It was really fun.
Now, to me, like, and I, when we were asking you to be on the show, and I remember you were saying, "Oh, no one knows who I am," and to me, being a Monster fan, like the name JanetAnnGallow is like saying Julia Roberts.
Oh my goodness! I never would have thought that.
How about that, Janet?
That's really something, because I wasn't even involved in anything 12 years ago. I was just doing my thing, and that was about it. And then I got introduced to a lot of people, and before I knew it, I was doing the convention shows.
Oh, great. Now, I got to say to the audience, and this is an interesting thing, you're best known to horror fans like myself for Ghost of Frankenstein.
Right.
And there's a scene in the movie, you're like 5 years old, you're a little girl by herself playing with her ball. And these like older boys who are bullies take your ball and throw it on a rooftop. RonChaney Jr., as the Frankenstein monster, shows up. They get scared and run away. Now, you, as the little girl, are not at all afraid of the monster. You just look at him as a friend, and it's like you could see he's touched by your innocence. And in real life, wasn't that your relationship with RonChaney Jr.?
Yes, I really loved Lon. I really loved him. And when my mother passed away, he and his wife, Patsy, wanted to adopt me and my brother, both.
Yeah, we just talked about that with RonChaney a few minutes ago.
RonChaney sends his love, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
He's a sweetheart. We have a lot of fun together.
Now, your mom died when you were 8, I think.
Right. Yeah, I was 8 years old.
Lon Chaney Jr. wanted to adopt you and your brother.
Right.
But your father was against this.
Oh, yeah. My dad wouldn't even consider it. But, that's because he said, no way. I'm not going to lose my kids. I lost my wife. That's enough.
Oh, of course.
Sure.
Now, but he used to drive you to the Cheney's house, and you and your brother would spend the day with Lon Chaney.
Well, really, it was me and my mother.
Oh, you and your mother. Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. We spent many, many days at the Chaney house. My mom was what you would call probably a stage mom at the time. And she and Lon got along real well, and so did Patsy, his wife, with her. So they used to invite us over all the time. We were always going over to the Chaney's house.
And I heard on the set, Lon Chaney Jr., who played the top 4 monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Mummy, and the Wolfman. And he was like, he had a reputation back then. Like adults didn't get along with him, it seems, because he was a drinker. But you, I mean, it's like you got through to him. I think he loved children.
He did. And he had 2 boys from a previous wife. And that's where Ron comes into. He's one of the grandsons. And he didn't have any children with Patsy, his wife at the time. And she wanted children. And, of course, that's how it all came about, that they wanted to adopt me and my brother.
How did you come to be cast in The Ghost of Frankenstein to begin with, Janet?
Well, I had worked in one short little film, Almost Married, I think it was the name of it, and I just had a very small part in it for Universal. And then they invited me back to try out for Ghost of Frankenstein, and my mother took me back, and I got the part.
And you weren't at all frightened by the subject matter, by the.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, not at all. No.
It's so
for
funny
you.
how the movie and your relationship with him imitate each other.
Yes, that's very true.
And he would, in his full Frankenstein makeup, ride you around on his shoulders.
Yeah.
And he would go off, and as Frankenstein, he would walk off and buy you ice cream.
Oh, yeah. He was very good to me. And so was the director and Bella. They were all very good to me.
Oh, tell us about Bela Lugosi.
Oh, he was a great guy. Great guy. Very sweet. And I really had the, what would you say, the whole cast. I had everybody just having a good time with me. I had fun on the whole thing. Because, it was just like a big game for me. I had fun.
Because Lugosi, he was returning from Son of Frankenstein,
right.
where he played the great part Igor.
Uh-huh.
And it was like a great role, great performance.
Yeah, he was good.
Where he was
Very good.
Put my brain in the monster's body.
Right.
Igor's body is no good. I will have the strength of 100 men.
That's very good. That's
are
very
you
good.
Are you having a flashback, Janet?
Yes.
So the two monsters, Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi, were like sweethearts to you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were all so nice to me, and they always had things going on for me to do and play and, always. So it was great.
I found this interesting, Janet. You talked about memorizing the entire script. You knew You knew everybody's part.
Yeah, I had to because I didn't read at that time.
Yeah, what were you, 5 years? We said it in the intro, but it's
yeah.
You were
and
5.
My mother would read me lines of before my part would come in, so I'd know that part when they would say it, and then I would have my lines right underneath.
And so your mother was like very pretty.
Oh yes, she sure was.
So I kind of imagine she was like an actress or wanted to be an actress in her day.
Yeah, she really she was very pretty, and she came down from San Jose, California, and first thing she did was bleach her hair blonde. And she was Irish and Swedish, so her complexion did very well with the blonde hair. So.
And I've heard you describe her, Janet, as a classic stage mother.
Oh yeah, she was. She was great. She was great. We had a very close relationship as long as I had her.
And can you tell me some of the activities that Chaney and Lugosi would have with you to keep you entertained, if you remember any of those?
They play hide and seek, that kind of.
Was he wearing the makeup when you?
Oh yeah, they'd have the makeup on. See, I used to watch him get his makeup put on, Lon. So that's why people would ask me, weren't you scared? I wasn't scared because I knew what he looked like underneath the makeup.
That's great.
So, Lon Chaney as the Frankenstein monster and Bela Lugosi as Igor were playing hide and seek with you.
That's right. Hide and seek, or they put me on their leg and bounce me up and down like a horse ride. I mean, it was fun. It was a fun. I never had a bad moment on the set. Never.
Gilbert would give 3 years of his life to go back in time and play hide and seek with you guys. What do you remember?
We had a good time.
What do you remember? Anything about your other co-stars, Janet? About Ralph Bellamy or Cedric Hardwicke?
Well, not really, because they didn't pay a lot of attention to me.
Well, you were
Yeah.
5.
And Lionel,
And they were busy with their own lives, So the ones I was with was Bella and Lon most of the time, and a little bit of Evelyn Anchors too.
Oh, Evelyn Anchors, yeah.
she was the scream queen of all the Universal monster movies. This beautiful actress, Evelyn Anchors.
Pretty, very pretty,
and
very sweet, very nice to me.
Do you recall anything else about, you were in an Abbott and Costello movie, too. And you had a short career,
Yes.
Janet. You were in Aid Hay.
Right.
When Gilbert and I love Abbott and Costello. Do you have any memories of that? And by the way, Shemp Howard was in Aid Hay.
Oh, wow.
Worth mentioning.
Wow. So Abbott and Costello and Shemp. Do you have any memories of the Unholy Three?
Well, I have a lot of memories of Lou. Abbott was, again, kind of in his own world. And but Lou was very, very sweet to me, very nice, and we joked around all the time, and he was always teasing me and stuff. It was a nice relationship. Abbott, like I said, he was in his own place, in his own world, and so
Professional.
that was fine.
But you and Lou Costello would play together.
Oh yeah. And then when I had to slap him. No, let's see. I don't remember if I kissed him first. I did one time I kissed him and one time I slapped him. So I can't remember which came first.
See, he was used to getting smacked by Bud Abbott in their
I know,
act.
but I smacked him too.
Yeah, that's an honor, smacking Lou Costello. And so would he be there going, "Hey, Janet, let's..."
I don't know.
You had a short career, Janet. When your mom passed away, I was reading a bio about you, and when your mom passed away, your dad would continue to take you to auditions and take you on sets. But
Yeah,
it
for
kind
a while. She passed away when I was 8. I think I stopped completely when I was about 11. I didn't do anything after that. Dad couldn't keep doing that because he had a job to do. He had to go to work. So where my mom was not working, so she always took me everywhere that I had to go, And we'd ride the buses and the streetcars and stuff to go to Universal Studios and different studios that we'd go to. But Dad couldn't keep that up. After a couple of years, he said, "I can't do this anymore." And so then I just dropped out.
And did you ever consider going back into acting? I mean, you say you made your last film at the age of 11. Did you ever did the bug ever bite you in the years to come?
Well, a little bit in high school, but I never did anything about it. Never did anything.
You had a family by then, and
Now, you had gotten married at one point, and then I think you split with your husband. And I remember reading an interview that said you went into an acting school for
I went to Pierce College and took drama classes, yes.
And
just for fun.
Did you tell everybody there who you were?
No.
and
I never did.
And I think you said you went into it because that's something you felt comfortable with, acting.
Yes, I did, and I had just gotten a divorce, so it was a case of where I just needed something to occupy my time, and so that's what I did.
Now, what I wonder, because at one point you think, well, your mom died and then your career stopped. But with so many child actors, when they hit 11 or 12, their career ends anyway because they're looked upon as, gee, they're old.
Right, exactly. That's very true. And then if you can get through that little bit of teenager, preteen life, then you can hit it again. But that takes a lot of an agent working with you and trying to get your job.
And it's like the most painful time for kids because they'll get a pimple or their voice changes and everyone's going, "Ooh, what happened to you?" Like just aging, just growing into an adult is like a bad thing.
Well, I think I remember going to one director's office once with my dad, but you get rejected real quick because if you haven't done anything in a long time, they don't really care.
Yeah.
I find it interesting, Janet. So you leave the business at 11, and you're for lack of a better word, a civilian for all these years. And what
Yeah.
and what happened about 10 years ago? The people from the convention started coming around, and
Well, what happened was I went to the Jack and Jill Universal luncheon at the Sportsman's Lodge, and
I know the Sportsman's Lodge right there in Sherman Oaks.
Right, and they said, "Oh, we've been looking for you forever," and I'm going, "What?" And they said, "Yeah. You were the little girl." Yeah, I was a little girl, and they started talking to me, and they said, "Well, we've been looking for you." And I said, "Well, I've been around. I didn't know you were looking for me." But I went to the Jack and Jill luncheon, and then after that, I was constantly asked to come to the luncheon, and then that's when I started doing signings.
So how does it feel to know that to this day you have fans like myself who who know who JanetAnnGallow is and are major fans?
Tell them the truth, Janet. It's a little scary.
It is. Because I think, oh, do I really? No, I know people write to me and they'll ask me questions and stuff, which is fine. I don't mind answering anything. But it is a little scary because you don't know if they really want to talk to you or if they're just doing this for fun or what. In today's world, it's a different world.
Oh, yeah.
Than when I was, coming up in the business. So it's a little different. But I have met some wonderful people out there at the conventions back east in New Jersey and in Pennsylvania that are just wonderful people. I mean, they're great. And they come up to me and bring their little kids up to me, and it's really nice. It's really nice.
Now, did you work on a movie with Buster Keaton?
Yes, I did.
Wow.
I didn't have any big lines in it, but I was in the movie. Yes. Something Minds the Baby. What was the name of that, honey?
Yeah, we could look it up.
Which Minds the Baby?
But
Yeah.
Did you have any memories of Buster Keaton?
Not really, because I only worked on the set just a few times. I had about 4 or 5 scenes, and that was it. So
Because Frank and I always laugh about how many guests we've had on this podcast who have worked and known Buster Keaton.
Yeah, I think you're the 5th or the 6th one, Janet.
Yeah.
Well,
I met him and everything, but I didn't have any real lines with him. In other words, I didn't have any scenes with him.
Right.
And being being a former child actress, how do you feel when you hear and read these stories about how many child performers just had terrible lives after that?
I know. I feel very badly for them. I had a mother that I think even if she had not died, she would have protected me from a lot of stuff because she was a very strong Catholic woman, and I don't think she would have allowed me to get in with the wrong crowd or anything like that. That's just my own opinion.
Well, I have to tell you, Janet, we started, in addition to all the people we've interviewed who knew Buster, Chuck McCann, James Caron, Frankie Avalon we talked to who worked with Buster. It was actually a pretty long list. I think you're the 6th or 7th person. I have to tell you that when we started this podcast, Gilbert and his lovely wife, Dara, and me, now almost 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and from the very beginning, when we sat down and we started making a guest list, Gilbert was saying, we have to get to JanetAnnGallow. Your name was on the list from the very beginning, from day one.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah,
that's very nice of you guys.
It's true.
Every week we were like trying to look for these different, we've had some big names on, and I kept saying, no, look, we got to get JanetAnnGallow.
It started to become a runner after a while, Janet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, there's only like one show or one convention I haven't been to yet, and that's the Chiller one. I don't know if you've ever.
Oh,
yes,
yeah, sure.
yes.
We did the one in New Jersey last year.
Yeah, I haven't been to Chiller yet. That's the only one. Outside of that, I've been to Monster Madness and all the other ones that, Monster Madness, Monsterpalooza, Monster, gosh, I'm trying to think of all of them. They're all different, and they're all very nice. I mean, they really treat you very well.
And I got to tell you, it's true when I say I look at you as Julia Roberts and Sandra Bullock. And
my goodness.
And I was just telling RonChaney, to me, when I watch RonChaney Jr. in a movie, I'm a teenage girl watching Justin Bieber.
That's pretty neat.
Well, Janet, it's a thrill to talk to you finally. It's been, like I said,
I'm very flattered that you guys wanted to talk to me.
Oh,
really
you don't know how many times when we had meetings to discuss who I kept yelling out, JanetAnnGallow, get her. Find out some information, you get her on the show.
This fulfills a lifelong dream for Gilbert, Janet.
Yeah, see, I could die now.
Oh, that's sweet.
Well, thanks.
This was on my bucket list. So let me just wrap up. I'm Gilbert Gottfried. This has been Gilbert Gottfried's amazing Colossal podcast with my co-host, Frank Santopadre. And finally, the star of Ghost of Frankenstein, who worked with RonChaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi and Lionel Atwill and Ralph Bellamy and Evelyn Ankers
And Buster Keaton.
and Abbott and Costello and Shemp from the Three Stooges. The great. Do you remember anything about Shemp before we let you go?
No,
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We have been talking to the great JanetAnnGallow. Thank you so much.
Janet, happy Halloween.
well.
And look us up when you're let us know when you're coming to Chiller in New Jersey.
Okay, well, when they invite me, I will come.
Yeah, because we'd love to meet you in person.
Okay, and I'd love to meet you guys, too.
Thanks again, Janet.
Thank you for doing
You're
this show. It was
Bye-bye.
a thrill for me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.